pie is a baked dish which is usually made of a pastry dough casing that contains a filling of various sweet or savory ingredients. Sweet pies may be filled with fruit, as in an apple pie, nuts pecan pie, fruit preserves jam tart, brown sugar pie, sweetened vegetables rhubarb pie, or with thicker fillings based on eggs and dairy, as in custard pie and cream pie. Savory pies may be filled with meat, as in a steak pie or a Jamaican patty, eggs and cheese, such as quiches or British flans, or a mixture of meat and vegetables, pot pie. Pies are defined by their crusts. A filled pie, also single crust or bottom crust, has pastry lining the baking dish, and the filling is placed on top of the pastry but left open. A top crust pie has the filling in the bottom of the dish and is covered with a pastry or other covering before baking. A two-crust pie has the filling completely enclosed in the pastry shell. Short crust pastry is a typical kind of pastry used for pie crusts, but many things can be used, including baking powder biscuits, mashed potatoes, and crumbs. Pies can be a variety of sizes, ranging from bite size to those designed for multiple servings. Etymology. A detail of a painting by January Brueghel the Elder, 1568 to 1625, and Peter Paul Rubens, 1577 to 1640, depicting several bird pies. Cooked birds were frequently placed by European royal cooks on top of a large pie to identify its contents. The first known use of the word pie appears in 1303 in the expense accounts of the Bolton Priory in Yorkshire. However, the Oxford English Dictionary is uncertain to its origin and says no further related word is known outside English. A possible origin is that the word pie is connected with a word used in farming to indicate a collection of things made into a heap. For example, a heap of potatoes covered with earth. One source of the word pie may be the magpie, a bird known for collecting odds and ends in its nest. The connection could be that medieval pies also contained many different animal meats, including chickens, crows, pigeons, and rabbits. One 1450 recipe for gret pies that might support the magpie etymology contained what Charles Perry called odds and ends, including beef suet, capons, hens, both mallard and teal ducks, rabbits, woodcocks, and large birds such as herons and storks, plus beef marrow, hard-cooked egg yolks, dates, raisins, and prunes. History. Antiquity. Early pies were in the form of flat, round, or free-form crusty cakes called galettes, consisting of a crust of ground oats, wheat, rye, or barley containing honey inside. These galettes developed into a form of early sweet pastry or desserts, evidence of which can be found on the tomb walls of the pharaoh Ramesses II, who ruled from 1304 to 1237 BC, located in the Valley of the Kings. Sometime before 2000 BC, a recipe for chicken pie was written on a tablet in Sumer. A 19th century depiction of a Roman feast where pastry-covered meat dishes were served. The Romans made a plain pastry of flour, oil, and water to cover meats and fowls which were baked, thus keeping in the juices. The Roman approach of covering birds or hams with dough has been called more of an attempt to prevent the meat from drying out during baking than an actual pie in the modern sense. The covering was not meant to be eaten. It filled the role of what was later called puff paste. A richer pastry, intended to be eaten, was used to make small pasties containing eggs or little birds, which were among the minor items served at banquets. The first written reference to a Roman pie is for a rye dough that was filled with a mixture of goat's cheese and honey. The first-century Roman cookbook Apicius makes various mentions of recipes which involve a pie case. By 160 BC, Roman statesman Marcus Porcius Cato, 234 to 149 BC, who wrote De Agricultura, notes the recipe for the most popular pie cake called placenta. Also called libum by the Romans, it was more like a modern-day cheesecake on a pastry base, often used as an offering to the gods. With the development of the Roman Empire and its efficient road transport, pie cooking spread throughout Europe. Wealthy Romans combined many types of meats in their pies, including mussels and other seafood. Roman pie makers generally used vegetable oils, such as olive oil, to make their dough. Medieval era. In the medieval era, pies were usually savory meat pies made with beef, lamb, wild duck, magpie pigeon, spiced with pepper, currants, or dates. Medieval cooks had restricted access to ovens due to their costs of construction and need for abundant supplies of fuel. Since pies could be easily cooked over an open fire, this made pies easier for most cooks to make. At the same time, by partnering with a baker, a cook could focus on preparing the filling. The earliest pie doughs were probably an inedible, stiff mixture of rye flour and water. The earliest pie recipes refer to coffins, the word actually used for a basket or box, with straight sealed sides and a top. Open-top pies were called traps. Until the mid-16th century, this British pie dough known as coffin was used as a baking dish. These pies were meant to be eaten with the hands. The hardened coffin pastry was not necessarily eaten, its function being to contain the filling for baking and to extend its shelf life. The thick crust was so sturdy it had to be cracked open to get to the filling. This may also be the reason why early recipes focus on the filling over the surrounding case, with this development leading to the use of reusable earthenware pie cases, which reduced the use of expensive flour. Ceramic pie dishes were not used until the 16th century. Medieval pie crusts were often baked first, to create a pot of baked dough with a removable top crust, hence the name pot pie. The first unequivocal reference to pie in a written source is in the 14th century Oxford English Dictionary, SB pie. The eating of mince pies during festive periods is a tradition that dates back to the 13th century, as the returning Crusaders brought pie recipes containing meats, fruits, and spices. Some pies contained cooked rabbits, frogs, crows, and pigeons. In 1390, the English cookbook A Form of Curry had a recipe for tarts of flesh, which included a ground-up mixture of pork, hard-boiled eggs, and cheese, blended with spices, saffron, and sugar. The coffin dough for the 14th century apple pie recipe from the Form of Curry was probably a simple mix of water and whatever flour was available in the late Middle Ages. The recipe included spices, apples, raisins, pears, and figs. The 14th century French chef Taillevent instructed bakers to crenellate pie shells and reinforce them so that they can support the meat. One of his pies was high enough that it resembled a model of a castle, an illusion enhanced by miniature banners for the nobles at the event. Pies in the 15th century included birds, as songbirds at the time were a delicacy and protected by royal law. At the coronation of 8-year-old English King Henry VI, 1422 to 1461, in 1429, partridge and peacock and hackle were served, alleged by some modern writers to consist of cooked peacock mounted in its skin on a peacock-filled pie. The expressions "eat crow" and 4 and 20 blackbirds are sayings from the era when crow and blackbirds were eaten in pies. Cooked birds were frequently placed by European royal cooks on top of a large pie to identify its contents, leading to its later adaptation in pre-Victorian times as a porcelain ornament to release of steam. The apple pie was first referenced in writing in 1589, when the poet R. Green wrote, "Thy breath is like the seam of apple pies." Medieval England had an early form of sweet pies called tarts, and fruit pies were unsweetened, because sugar was a rare and costly status symbol. In the Middle Ages, a pie could have several items as its filling, but a pastry would have only a single filling. 15th to 17th centuries. A detail from Pietercleese, 1627 painting of turkey pie. Until the start of the 15th century, most pies were expected to contain meat or fish. Fresh fruit did not become widely used until sugar dropped in price during the 16th century. The first cherry pie is recorded in the late 16th century, when Queen Elizabeth I was served cherry pie. Elizabeth was often given gifts of quince or pear pies for New Year. During the Shakespearean era, fruit pies were served hot, but others were served at room temperature, as they would be brought to the table more than once. Apple pies were popular in Tudor and Stuart times. Pippins were baked with cloves, cinnamon, dates, and candied orange peels. Rosewater was often added to apple pies. During the Puritan era of Oliver Cromwell, some sources claim mince pie eating was banned as a frivolous activity for 16 years, so mince pie making and eating became an underground activity. The ban was lifted in 1660, with the restoration of the monarchy. Food historian Annie Gray suggests that the myth of the Puritans actively banning mince pies came about due to the defenders of Christmas, who reported Puritan vitriol with a certain amount of exaggeration. It was in the 16th century that a puff paste began to be used to make flakier pie crusts. In Gervase Markham's 1615 book The English Huswife, there is a recipe for puff paste where the paste is kneaded, rolled thinly many times while layering with butter. This made a flaky butter pastry to cover meat for pies or for tarts. There's also a pie recipe that calls for an entire leg of mutton and 3 pounds of suet, along with salt, cloves, mace, currants, raisins, prunes, dates, and orange peel, which made a huge pie that could serve a large group. According to Markham, crusts made with fine wheat flour required the addition of eggs to be sturdy enough for raised pies. In the 17th century, Ben Jonson described a skilled pie cook by comparing the cook to a fortification builder who makes citadels of curious fowl and fish and makes dry ditches, bulwark pies, and ramparts of immortal crusts. 18th century. In the Georgian era, sweetened pies of meat and dried fruits began to become less popular. In recipe books of the period, sweet veal, sweet lamb, or sweet chicken pies are given alongside recipes for unsweetened alternatives, with the same ingredients made for those who could no longer stomach the sweetened flesh meats enjoyed by earlier generations. Pumpkin pie was fashionable in England from the 1650s onward, then fell out of favor during the 18th century. Pumpkin was sliced, fried with sweet herbs, sweetened with sugar, and eggs were added. This was put into a pastry case with currants and apples. Pumpkin pie was introduced to America by early colonists, where it became a national dish. 19th century. During the 19th century, pies became, according to food historian Janet Clarkson, universally esteemed in a way that other foods were not. In 1806, Mrs. Rundell, in her observations on savory pies in a new system of domestic cookery, stated that there are few articles of cookery more generally liked than relishing pies, if properly made. Alexis Soyer, a celebrity cook of the 19th century, said in his book Shilling Cookery for the People, 1860, "From childhood we eat pies, from girlhood to boyhood we eat pies. In fact, pies in England may be considered as one of our best companions du voyage through life. It is we who leave them behind, not they who leave us. For our children and grandchildren will be as fond of pies as we have been. Therefore it is needful that we should learn how to make them, and make them well. Believe me, I am not jesting, but if all the spoilt pies made in London on one single Sunday were to be exhibited in a row beside a railway line, it would take above an hour by special train to pass in review these culinary victims." United States, 17th century, 1980s. The Pilgrims brought the pie recipes they knew from their home countries with them when they arrived to the colonies. Colonists appreciated the food preservation aspect of crusty-topped pies from Britain, which were often seasoned with dried fruit, cinnamon, pepper, and nutmeg. The first pies they created in the United States were adapted pies that were based on berries and fruits pointed out to them by the native North Americans. According to James E. McWilliams, American cooks embraced the rough edges of American foodways to foster a pastoral ideal that promoted the frontier values that the colonists had once downplayed. Apple pie became popular because apples were easy to dry and store in barrels over the winter. Pie fillings could be made with very few ingredients to stretch their meager provisions. These pies later came to be known as desperation pies. First originating in the 18th century, they included pies like sugar cream pie and Kentucky transparent pie. By the 19th century, pies were a staple of the American family meal, and women were responsible for figuring out how to make tasty pies that fit within the family budget. Once the British had established Caribbean colonies, sugar became less expensive and more widely available, which meant that sweet pies could be readily made. Molasses was popular in American pies due to the rum and slave trade with the Caribbean islands, and maple syrup was an important sweetener in northern states, after indigenous people taught settlers how to tap maple trees and boil down the sap. In the Midwest, cheese and cream pies were popular due to the availability of big dairy farms. In the U.S. South, African Americans enjoyed sweet potato pies due to the widespread availability of this type of potato. By the 1870s, the new science of nutrition led to criticism of pies, notably by Sarah Tyson Rohrer, a cooking teacher and food editor who warned the public about how much energy pies take to digest. Rohrer stated that all pie crusts are to be condemned and her cookbook only included an apple tart, jelly and meringue-covered crackers, pâté, and a hygienic pie, which had apple slices or a pumpkin custard baked in biscuit dough. In 1866, Harper's Magazine included an article by C.W. Gessner that stated that although we cry for pie when we are infants, pie kills us finally, as the heavy crust cannot be digested. Another factor that decreased the popularity of pies was industrialization and increasing movement of women into the labor market, which changed pie making from a weekly ritual to an occasional undertaking on special occasions. In the 1950s, after WW II, the popularity of pies rebounded in the U.S., especially with commercial food inventions such as instant pudding mixes, Cool Whip topping, and Jell-O gelatin, which could be used as fillings, ready-made crusts, which were sold frozen, and alternative crusts made with crushed potato chips. There was a pie renaissance in the 1980s, when old-fashioned pie recipes were rediscovered and a wide range of cross-cultural pies were explored. Regional variations. Homemade meat pie with beef and vegetables. Meat pies with fillings such as steak, cheese, steak and kidney, beef and ale, lamb and mint, minced beef, or chicken and mushroom are popular in the United Kingdom, Australia, South Africa, and New Zealand as takeaway snacks. They are also served with chips as an alternative to fish and chips at British chip shops. Pot pies with a flaky crust and bottom are also a popular dish, typically with a filling of meat, particularly beef, chicken, or turkey, gravy, and mixed vegetables, potatoes, carrots, and peas. Frozen pot pies are often sold in individual serving size. Fruit pies may be served with a scoop of ice cream, a style known in North America as pie à la mode. Many sweet pies are served this way. Apple pie is a traditional choice, though any pie with sweet fillings may be served à la mode. This combination, and possibly the name as well, is thought to have been popularized in the mid-1890s in the United States. Apple pie can be made with a variety of apples. Cultivars such as the Golden Delicious, Pink Lady, Granny Smith, and Rome Beauty are popular for usage in pies. In literature, cold pigeon pies and venison pasties appear in novels by Jane Austen, but also more generally in writing in the 18th century. The character Mrs. Elton, from the 1815 novel Emma, believes herself to be modern, but nevertheless plans to take pigeon pies and cold lamb to a country outing to Box Hill, and consults George Turberville's 1575 work The Noble Art of Venery, 1575, for advice. In the 1817 novel Persuasion, Jane Austen includes pies in her description of an old-fashioned Christmas spread, mentioning trestles and trays, bending under the weight of brawn and cold pies. In the whole of Persuasion, brawn and cold pies are the only specific mention of food. They are also the only Christmas foods to be mentioned in any of Jane Austen's novels. In popular culture, in the United States, a popular idiom is American as apple pie. Their pie, especially apple pie, became intertwined to the point that in 1902, the New York Times asserted that pie is the food of the heroic, and no pie-eating people can ever be permanently vanquished. The slang expression to eat humble pie comes from the humble pie, which was made with chopped animal offal. It's a piece of pie, meaning that something is easy, dates from 1889. Pie-eyed, meaning drunk, dates from 1904. The expression pie in the sky, to refer to an unlikely proposal or idea, comes from The Preacher and the Slave, a 1911 Joe Hill song. Pie throwing. Cream-filled or topped pies are favorite props for slapstick humor. Throwing a pie in a person's face has been a staple of film comedy, since Ben Turpin received one in Mr. Flip in 1909. More recently, pieing has also become a political act. Some activists throw cream pies at politicians and other public figures as a form of protest. Types: savory, bacon and egg pie, butter pie, calzone, cheese and onion pie, Chicago-style pizza, chicken and mushroom pie, corned beef pie, curry pie, game pie, fish pie, flipper pie, hominy pie, Jamaican patty, calicaca, meat pie, meat and potato pie, pasty, pork pie, pot pie, quiche, rabbit pie, Scotch pie, shepherd's pie, stargazy pie, steak pie, steak and kidney pie, steak and kidney pudding, tourtière, savory pies, a chicken and lamb pie, a traditional Cornish pasty filled with steak and vegetables, a chicken pie with a traditional pie bird. Sweet. Some of these pies are pies in name only, such as the Boston cream pie, which is a cake. Black bottom pie, buko pie, bundivara, cashew pie, chess pie, chestnut pie, chiffon pie, cream pie, custard pie, egg pie, milk pie, peanut pie, pecan pie, pumpkin pie, choufle pie, sugar pie, sweet potato pie, turtle pie, walnut pie, sweet pies, a slice of chess pie, a slice of pecan pie, pumpkin pie showing texture of surface. Fruit. Many fruit and berry pies are very similar, varying only the fruit used in filling. Fillings for sweet or fruity are often mixed, such as strawberry rhubarb pie. Apple pie, banoffee pie, named for the combination of bananas and toffee. Blackberry pie, blueberry pie, cherry pie, key lime pie, lemon pie, lemon meringue pie. Mince pie, although formerly made with finely minced meat, it is now made with fruit. Rhubarb pie, Saskatoonberry pie, strawberry pie,